Ask my ranking member's seat right now to Senator Mullins while I walk across and ask in another committee, and then I'll defer to Senator Marshall for questioning.
All right. Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Thank you, Chairman. I want to, first of all, submit for the record a couple of op-eds. The first one written by a senator from Democrat from Indiana and my hero, Bob Dole from Kansas. This is an editorial just talking about the Bayh-Dole law, which encourages and has been so successful, encourages federal government to work with the private sector. And also an op-ed that I wrote, goodness, mine was in 2022, about how fixing prices kills innovation. So we'll submit both of those for the record, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Chairman, let the record show that you and I agree on something again. This is my goal. Every one of these hearings is for you and me to agree on something. And I agree that charging Americans $130 for this vaccine is outrageous. But where we always disagree is the cure. You know, how do we get there? And I know one of your biggest concerns is the cost of insulin as it has been. And I presented this graph that shows what the cost of insulin has done as competition is being introduced in the market. And with 2 biosimilars coming on board now, the cost of, I checked with one of my pharmacies back home, the month supply of insulin, $400 6 months ago, now a biosimilar for $120. And I'm not satisfied. And I also want to point out, though, this big difference between the gross cost, the list price, versus the net cost, and how pharmacy benefit managers work in that margin for their rebates is something we need to tackle yet as well. Okay, let's go to the next graph here, Charlotte. Again, this is what happens in America when we have innovation and competition, that the U.S. leads the world in access to miracle drugs. And we'll go to this last one as well, just showing how certainly America's paying too much for medicines, but at least we have access to these miracle drugs. And I would ask everybody, which miracle drugs do you want to give up? Which one of these would you give up? Would you give up CAR T-cell therapy, the miracle cures we have in cancer? Which ones would we give up? So we got to be careful we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will. Mr. Bancel, you guys have been working on mRNA technology, I think, since at least 2010, 2011, and you had a lot of patents you'd issued. Were most of those patents in that era around mRNA development, vaccine development?
Good morning, Senator. Thanks for the question. Yes, the company only works on mRNA because we believe if we invest in the platform and improve it, we can do more application of more medicine across therapeutic areas. So it's mRNA focused.
Right. You know, I bet you expected when you invented this vaccine, you would come to Congress and get a hero's welcome, that you'd get a Nobel Prize even for this. You had no idea that you were going to be castigated because of your success as well. So that's the two sides of this coin that we're concerned about. I want to back up to your time with your previous company, bioMérieux.
Yeah, bioMérieux.
And at that time, the Wuhan laboratory, the BSL-4, Biosecurity Level 4 lab was being made, and your predecessor had something to do with that. Did you keep track of the Wuhan lab being going up, and were you concerned about it?
So, Senator, bioMérieux had no involvement with the Wuhan lab. I was aware, of course, because bioMérieux is the leading company in infectious disease diagnostic. I was aware there was a new high-security lab being built in China, but I had zero involvement. My company has zero involvement.
Okay. This is a pretty complex question. Is Moderna or Moderna executives had agreements with organizations in China, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology or with EcoHealth? And if so, what are the terms, and does Moderna owe any of those people any monies?
So we never had any agreement with Chinese labs or Wuhan labs, Senator.
Or EcoHealth?
I'm not aware of that lab.
Okay. Were you aware in September 2019 when the Wuhan lab and the Chinese took down their DNA lab bank? Were you aware of that pretty much in sequence with when that occurred?
I was not, Senator.
Okay. In September 2019 is when that occurred. And in December of 2019, you took your jointly owned mRNA coronal vaccine candidates to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill to work with Dr. Ralph Baric as well. What was the impetus to do that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It was actually a vaccine for candidate against MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which is of a corona family. but of course not SARS-CoV-2. It's a different one.
But you had no idea that what was exploding in China already, probably since September.
No, I was made aware for the first time, as I said during my testimony, at the Christmas break. By reading the newspaper, there was a little article saying there was pneumonia-like symptom cases that were weird in Wuhan, which is why I directly contacted the NIH at that time to say, hey, are you aware about this? Because we had been working together on coronavirus, as you mentioned, because we believe that the highest risk of pandemic was...
You never worked with China, never worked with the WIV.
At Moderna, no, sir.
Well, what about not in Moderna?
So when I was running bioMérieux before, we had a team in China. The company was in 40 plus countries. So we were selling product in China. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This week, I'm proud to once again introduce my bipartisan Fair Drug Pricing Act with my colleague,